Welcome to Cutoff Genes, the podcast that teaches you how to find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie. And I am all by myself. Nobody else is here. This week we have a special episode. When we usually record, I happen to be out of town in Walla Walla, Washington, with my friend Betsy Haddon from high school, and she agreed to be interviewed and tell her story for the show. So we decided that would be a good little alternative. And I'm actually splitting this interview into two separate episodes, and the second one will be a bonus that I'll just drop a couple of days from now to get the rest of it. So it's not going to be a regular episode with the Epic Odyssey and all that stuff, but at least you get two episodes. So don't be too mad. Okay, so that's what's going to happen, and I'm going to take a break, and right after that, you'll get to hear my interview with Betsy. Hang tight.
If you're enjoying Cutoff Genes, please subscribe, rate, and review.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's Jules here. I am in Walla Walla, Washington, with my dear friend, Betsy. And we went to high school together, and we have been friends for many, many years. And we share something in common in that we are both adopted. And Betsy and I had very different experiences as adoptees, I believe. Would you say that, Bets?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
so let's hear your point of view, shall we? When did you first find out you were adopted?
I've always known I was adopted. I could not tell you the day that my parents told me that I was adopted. It was just something that was in our family.
Yep.
Dialogue. The only thing where I can really remember where it was like, oh my God, is when my Uncle Bobby came over and he brought all this paperwork and asked my mom to go outside. And then she came in and we're like, what did Uncle Bobby want? I don't know how old I was. I know I was young. And she said, well, he is going to adopt a baby like you.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God. And what I remember is bawling. I was simply bawling. Because the only thing I knew at that time that adoption meant me.
You thought you were the only adopted person in the world?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
You know, that's all it meant to me. I know I was really young because I can remember my mom sitting down kneeling down to me and hugging me and saying, no, he's not taking you away from us.
Oh, so you thought he was taking you.
Yeah.
You thought you were the adoptee that just goes to different houses when they want you.
Exactly. You know, that's all I knew. So I don't know. And I couldn't tell you exactly when I figured out what adoption was.
Sure.
And,
Was there any secrecy in your family? Like, they were open about it, but did they try to convince you or try to influence you to kind of keep it in the family?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
That's interesting.
Never.
Okay.
They were very proud that they adopted me.
Mm-hmm.
They were proud that I was their daughter.
As they should be.
So, no, it was never kept as a secret or anything. Sometimes we had a good laugh of it. I remember being in my sister's wedding, and people going through at that time, because that was in the early 80s. At that time, there was a receiving line.
Oh, fancy.
Do you remember what that was?
Yep.
So in a receiving line, I remember everybody coming through and saying, oh, you look so much like your dad.
Yeah.
So...
yeah.
We used to laugh about that a lot. We never corrected people, not because it wasn't a secret. We just got,
whatever. Yeah.
A chuckle out of it. We thought that was pretty funny.
Right. Let's talk about your family dynamics. You are one of 4 children.
Right.
And who's adopted and who's not?
My younger brother and I. So I have an older brother and an older sister and then a younger brother.
Did you ever feel a difference between your biological siblings, your parents' biological children, and you and your brother Jim?
No,
No?
I don't think so growing up. I don't know. You know, there's just that sibling rivalry, you know?
Yeah.
That goes on.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with...
Yeah. So I don't think so at all.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so we used to talk about it. When we were in high school, we kind of bonded over the fact that we were both adopted, I think. And I remember back then asking you if you had any interest in finding your biological mother. Do you remember how you responded?
No, but I know how I felt back then and how I felt now. I never had, I think there's only 2 times growing up that I wanted to find him. One, I think when I was little, and one of the neighbors, she got something that I wanted and was going somewhere that I wanted to go to. I went and asked my mom, and she said, no, we can't afford it. So I went to my bedroom to pout, I think, and thinking, I wonder if the person who had me has money, which was really stupid, but I was young, but that's what goes through you. There was that. And then I was a very late bloomer. I did not get the breast that most people got. And I remember in junior high school, 8th grade to be exact, and going, and I think it was my sophomore year of high school, and I was still flat chested. And I was like, what the heck's going on? And I remember talking to my mom about it. I said, I think I would like to find my biological mother. And I remember my mom was shocked because we never talked about it. She's like, really? Okay, why? And I said, well, I need to know if she has boobs.
I'm sure that was very important at that time.
It was. It was. That's all that mattered to me at that time. I just wanted to know if I'm ever going to get him or not.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Yeah. Were you a late bloomer in all respects?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah, everything. So I finally got him, obviously, a little too much. So then, maybe later on I wondered, what size was she?
Careful what you wish for.
I know.
I think the next thing I knew in your story was we had been out of touch for a few years. And the next time we connected, you told me that you had met your biological mother.
I did. I never really had the yearning to go find her. My parents were my parents. My parents were wonderful. We did not have a lot of money growing up, but we had a lot of love and a lot of experiences. So we did a lot of fun things as kids. So I never had that missing thing. I never had that missing yearning. I never had that, oh, something's missing in my life.
Some of us feel that and some of us don't.
Right.
In my particular case, I loved my parents too, and they loved me, but I always had a feeling of emptiness.
Right.
That something was missing from me.
Yeah, I never had that. I never had that, or the curiosity to go find him until I was about 19. My mother had called me and told me that the attorney that handled my case when I was adopted had died.
Okay.
And they put the name of his secretary in the paper or something like that. I can't remember the whole thing. So I was like, I wonder if I could get my files from her. Why did I want the files? I don't know.
Right.
I really don't know. So I called her.
Because you could.
Yeah. So I called her up to see if I could get my files. And I don't remember our total conversation, but it was something to the extent is, I don't think you want to open up that can of worms. And the bottom line, I honestly, I don't remember the whole thing, but I remember her saying, no, she wasn't giving them to me.
How did you feel about somebody telling you what you did or didn't want to do?
Jules, I was only 18 or 19 at the time, so it didn't really matter.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Did
you think she knew something that maybe you would be disappointed if you found out and she was trying to protect you?
I don't think so. I remember being a little put off, but, that lasted for about 2.5 seconds. I was like, okay.
And that's the difference between you and me. That would have driven me crazy.
It didn't at the time because then life was really simple for me. I didn't have a direction in life or anything really what I was doing. So I just think then I was all about friends, nightlife, probably partying, stuff like that.
So what happened that made you finally connect with her?
Well, fast forward to 1990 when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I go to the first checkup with the doctor, which I never go to the doctor. There's just no reason to. And he's asking me all these questions. Family history. I mean, before that, you're asked stuff very infrequent. I really never went to the doctor. And, and you're just like, oh, I'm adopted, and people left it at that. But now there's another life involved. And they're asking me all these questions. What's the history? What's the cancer history? All that. And I was like, I guess this stuff is important.
Right.
And I've got this child growing in me, and I should probably figure this out.
Right.
And I don't think that...
We're drinking wine, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
Just
that was that slur. That's what you do in Walla Walla.
Yeah, we're in Walla Walla. It's wine country. It's beautiful here. We're on Betsy's back porch overlooking, what is it, a blueberry orchard? Is that what you said?
It's blueberry and a fruit tree orchard. So, yeah, so that's when I finally thought, well, I should probably figure that out. And so I did a little bit of research, and I don't think I had a computer yet then either. I have no idea where I figured this out, but I was told by someone had to tell me to call the hospital and get my birthing records at least. Maybe my birthing records might say something who she was.
Do you mean your birth records?
No, birthing.
What's
As
birthing
in,
records?
birthing is when my mother had me, or my biological person.
Also the medical records of when you
biological
were...
person,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, wait, did you catch that? What did you call her?
Biological person.
Okay, that's what you like to call
Well,
her.
I did. I made a slip and call her my my biological mother, but she's not my mother. She really is not. My mother is my mother.
Take note, people. Okay, so you wanted to get your birthing records.
Birthing records. Somebody told me to go get them, and they'll tell you, how did your birth go, how much you weighed, all that other stuff, which we had on my birth certificate, but perhaps they'll say something about her.
Of course.
And at least I thought, well, at least I'll know what my labor's going to be like.
Maybe, yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I call the hospital, tell them what I'm looking for, and they said, okay, you need this and certain records. So they attach me to this department that's going to give it to me, and it's Sister Perpetua who answers the phone.
I love this.
And it was a Catholic hospital where I was born, Chehalis, next to Centralia, where you and I went to high school, obviously, because Sister Perpetua. And I was like...
Which is the greatest name for a sister ever, by the way.
And I was like, oh, my gosh. And the one thing that sticks in my mind forever is Sister Perpetua's name. When they brought me to my mother to take me home, Sister Perpetua handed me to my mother.
So now you were talking to Sister Perpetua, the actual woman, or is it something that like a Sister Perpetua dies and another one takes over after her?
No,
Okay.
It was always the same Sister Perpetua
Okay.
in a habit and everything. It was just, she was there, and she has another connection to our family because when my grandmother died, she came into the room to say the prayer.
Okay.
So she was there as well. So she, Sister Perpetua gave life, and
She was
at the end of life.
perpetually in your family.
Yes. And she said, well, I can look it up. It'll probably take me the day to find it because I have to go down into the basement and dig through the archives and blah, 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 blah. So she did. And she faxed it to me. And it didn't tell me much. Everything was blacked out.
Right.
She had blacked everything out, and there was nothing there. And it was like 6 hours of labor.
Oh, that's not much.
No.
Yeah.
Like 6.5 hours. And I was like, score. Well, that didn't happen.
That didn't happen?
No, because, with my daughter, 32.5 hours of hell later, I had my daughter.
Yikes. So
The 5.5, and we learn later on why that was that way, and they needed a catcher's mitt. So yeah, I had that. Okay, whatever. So I have my daughter. And then I am pregnant with my son in 1993. Mm-hmm. And I had a bit of a cancer scare. And back then, I don't know what they call it now, but back then, when I was pregnant with him and went through all the tests and everything when you're first pregnant, I came back with a 5-high pap smear. It was very concerning.
Okay.
And actually, the doctor wanted me to terminate my pregnancy. Yeah.
Really?
And so I freaked out. And we decided to go on with it and everything. But I had, the doctor's question again, and I had the same doctor as, did you find anything out about your medical history? And again, I did not. Mm-hmm. So I went through a lot with that pregnancy because they did 3 very high-risk biopsies on my uterus along the way to make sure it wasn't rooting. I had to wait 8 weeks after I had my son, and then they did this new laser treatment out and lasered my uterus down to nothing.
So now you have no uterus?
No, I do have a uterus, but it's they told me once that procedure was done, I'd probably never have a problem again, and I haven't.
Oh. So here we are. Now you have 2 kids, and you had a cancer scare, but everything's all right.
Yeah, in the meantime, we moved from Quilcene, Washington, which is on the Olympic Peninsula, and we moved to Centralia, Washington.
Which is where you grew up.
Yeah, where I grew up, which was really ironic because I said, I'm never going back there. And so I'm going through everything, and we had accumulated a lot of stuff from the Navy, lots of Navy records, all kinds of Navy records, and saved. And I figured, well, it had been 7 years. They say, keep it for 7 years, and I was getting rid of it. So I was going through everything and putting it in the pile, I'm trying to condense this.
That's okay.
And I come across that birthing record. I was like, oh, well, I don't need this anymore. So I just look at it, and I toss it in the pile. And then I was getting ready to scoop it all up and start throwing it in a trash bag. That was before recycling, people. And something told me to go back and look at that paper. And it's weird. I don't even know where that notion came from.
It was like a little voice in the back of your head.
So I go back and look at the paper, and I'm sitting there scanning over it. Everything's blacked out. I said, I have no idea what the heck I'm supposed to be looking for here. And I was just getting ready to toss it in the pile again, and I got a glimpse. And I'm like, what's that? And I got to look at it, and there is the address, her address.
Score.
It was
That's
wild.
Huge. Yeah.
Her address. And I'm like, all these years.
You've had it right under your nose.
It had to have been 6 years at that point. How did I miss that?
How did you miss that? What?
How did I even have that fax to begin with? I have no idea why I kept it. So I'm online, and there is not a lot to Google off of, and all there is chat rooms, and never went into chat rooms. But I had found searching for birth people, or it was adoptees searching for or looking for or whatever. I got on there and told them what I had, and I knew I was, and the address back then. She was, when she was pregnant, everything, she lived in Centralia.
Right.
But she didn't have me in Centralia. It was weird. She went and had me in Chehalis. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? And so I get on there on this chat room, and I tell them what I have and everything. And boom, they told me to go look in the Polk directories. They said they'll tell you, who lived there at that time. And I guess...
What are they called?
Polk directories, Polk.
Oh, like
I don't even know if they're still in the libraries now.
Okay.
So basically, they just tell you who lives at that address.
Oh, that's actually a very handy.
Right. And I knew, and this is going to digress again a little bit, but I knew her name was White. When my parents were looking to adopt, my dad worked at this place called Yardbirds, big department store. And he knew this lady named Betty Dunes. And apparently he was talking to Betty Dunes, who was another department manager, about wanting to adopt. And she came up to my dad and said, hey, I know this gal that's wanting to give her baby up for adoption. Do you and Betty want her? My mother. And Betty said to Betty, do you want her? Well, yeah. So they were like, sure. And they went and got this attorney. And that's how they got me, was through that. And I know at some time my mom had asked, do you know what her name was? And the only thing she would ever tell my parents is that the last name's White. Okay. Oh, I know why. Oh, look, when you talk, I remember things. See? It's right. I remember why, because sometime in school, we were given the assignment to write a paper on our heritage.
Oh, interesting.
Where we came from, our nationality and everything.
Uh-huh.
And
I hated that assignment.
And that
Did
was,
you?
Yeah. And that
it irritated me as an adoptee.
Yeah. And that was in 4th grade with Mrs. Greer. Look at, oh my God, my brain still works. And I remember going up to Mrs. Greer and saying, Mrs. Greer, I don't know what my nationality is. I don't know. I was adopted. And she said, oh dear, everybody has a nationality. Go ask your mother. Yeah. I remember that for a fact.
Did she not get the part about you being adopted?
No, because I remember I was devastated.
So I think, she was just trying to, for the assignment, she didn't really care what your nationality was. She just wanted you to say whatever your nationality your parents were. Right.
I guess that's what she was getting at.
Ugh, I hated that.
And I remember going home and asking my mom, I said, Mom, do you know what my nationality is? I said, because I have homework and I need to know my nationality. And she said, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't. And I said, are you sure? How do we find this out? Because I didn't really understand in 4th grade. Mm-hmm. And she must have had my dad go and ask Betty Dunes.
Oh, okay.
And I remember Dad coming home from work, and I don't know if it was that night, the next day, or when it was. And he was so proud to tell me I was French Canadian.
Oh.
And that the last name was White.
Can I just say, I think we need to start a support group for every adoptee that has been given that assignment in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Because it's traumatizing for us, everybody. I don't know if you realize that. All right, enough said. Go ahead.
I think I remember somehow my mom thinks that we're related to Francis Scott Key. And I know she said to tell her that you're French Canadian and that you're related to Francis Scott Key.
Wait, does she think she's related to Francis Scott Key?
She did, and I don't know how she thought that.
Okay, so she's combining the both. You're French Canadian biologically, but you are, because you're her adopted child, related to Francis Scott Key.
I remember that. And you know what? I wish I would have, before my mother passed away, because I remembered that not too many years ago. Like, how did we get to that?
Okay, so we were talking about the Polk directory.
Right, now
Let's
that
talk about that.
we're refueled, so we can do this.
Oh, by the way, what are we drinking?
Oh, we are drinking a Sangiovese rosé from Alluve, one of my favorite rosés. I have a few favorite rosés, but
It's a local Walla Walla.
It's a local Walla Walla, yeah. Just a little plug about Walla Walla if you're a wino. We have over 135 wineries here. And so basically, back in the day, before we had computers and there was only paper, they published a book called The Polk Directories that put everybody in the community's address in the paper and who lived in the book and who lived there at the time. So I went in there and found the year, and it had the name White in it. So I went back a year and it was White, and another year and it was White, and then another year was Sartain. I was like, oh, maybe they just moved to this house. So I went back to Sartain, and then it came up Sartain. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And then I go back. I don't know how many years I went back, and it stayed Sartain the whole time. So
it went from White, it went from Sartain to White for a couple years, and then went back to Sartain.
So the Sartains had owned this family home for quite some time.
Okay, so
I just kept going back.
Right.
And then I thought, well, let's go forward and see what happens. And I think it was White for maybe 1 year, maybe two. I can't remember.
I jumped the gun.
And
That's what you were
and then
tell me.
it changed from going forward in the years. It changed from White to Sartain. So it was Sartain. Me getting anxious, I just jump up to the year of what it was, which was 99, I think, and it was Sartain still.
There was still a Sartain.
Yeah.
There.
So they were still living there.
And then what happened?
So I called my friend, and she came over, told her everything. Peggy was her name, and she went to the address. We decided it would be better for her to go to the address than me, simply because, one, I would probably throw up in front of her. I don't know what I would do. And I was just nervous to meet this person.
Well, sure.
That gave birth to me, and I want to find out what,
Right.
I need to know all my medical, most importantly, and then tell me why and all that other stuff, I don't think it really mattered back then. I was just super anxious and nervous and thought, well, if she really didn't want to meet me, then I guess I need to give her that.
You were okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was okay with that. But, most importantly, I want information.
Right, at least.
So if she doesn't really want to meet me, that's okay. I respect her for that. I respect the fact that she gave me to my parents. But, what I really wanted was information.
Right.
So she went over to the address in Centralia, and a man answered the door. And she said, she was Peggy. She was looking for a friend who was adopted. And he said, well, he didn't know anything about that, but his sister probably would know. And so gave the address of his sister's house.
Oh, so it wasn't at that house. Okay.
He lived there. That was his family's house.
Gotcha.
And so she went over to his sister's house, knocked on the door. A lady opened the door, and she said, I'm looking for blah, blah, my friend Betsy, blah, 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 blah.
Did she say she was looking for you?
No, she was looking for the birth person.
Okay.
For my friend Betsy, who was looking. And the lady that answered the door said, well, I don't know anything about that. And she said, well, I have this address. It's the only thing we have is that the lady who had her was at this address, and your brother sent me over here. And she goes, no. It was more than likely it was my mother's ex-husband at the time, because he was a womanizer, and it was probably one of his mistresses. Okay. He goes, well, if you can think of anything, here's my phone number. And what Betsy really, really wants is medical history more than anything. She's had 2 kids, a couple of a scare with cancer. Actually, I did have 2 with a lump on my breast, which turned out to be
benign.
Yeah. And she goes, she's just had a couple of scares with cancer, and she's just really wanting medical history. And the lady stopped talking and looked at her and opened the door and said, well, you better come in. So, and long story short, her name was Marie, and it turned out to be my biological birth person.
So Marie,
on the maternal side. So she found out that my biological,
Maternal lady.
that Marie's mother had breast cancer and died.
And that's what she died of. Okay.
Right.
That's good information. Yes.
And that Marie's aunt, which would have been her mother's sister, also died of breast cancer, I believe.
Okay.
And that there was diabetes that ran through the family. So, and so that was it. And so she came home and she gave me this information. She said she doesn't want to meet you. And I was like, okay.
And you were fine with that. You didn't feel, was there any pang of why? What's wrong with me?
No, I would have to say it was a new emotion that I never felt before because I felt rejected again.
Thank you. Second rejection. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, and I cannot tell you why, because I really didn't feel that way. I mean, honestly, my whole life, I didn't feel that way.
Right.
And I don't know why it tore me up so bad. And it was probably a good day, maybe 2 days before I got over it. My husband would probably tell you something different, but I remember just laying in the bed and being depressed about it.
Interesting.
And I have no idea why, because the only thing I really wanted was medical.
Yeah. I think it's perfectly normal to feel hurt by somebody whose body you came out of not wanting to know you.
I don't know.
And that's, you know what? It's okay to have both of those feelings.
Yeah. So that was a feeling. I know
You can feel both things.
And I don't know if I got so emotional over it because I didn't know what the emotion was that I was feeling.
Yeah.
And that maybe I was upset over the emotion that I was feeling because I had never felt that way before.
Right.
And it had never been the reason that I seeked her out. So I couldn't really tell you what that was all about. I know that it affected me quite.
Because it was about the primal wound. It was about deep down what actually goes on. You've always been a very assertive, strong person. And you're a tough cookie. So I think that took you by surprise that you weren't able to let that just, roll off your back like everything else does.
Yeah, just, and I never felt those emotions before, so that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
So, and then I think I just got over it, never thought about it again. Maybe a little bit. I did think about that feeling that I had. I didn't feel that way.
So you got over it after a couple days?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I didn't think much about it again or anything.
So I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, yes, you were hurt by that, but it wasn't something that hurt you to the core.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
Something that I got over. Fast forward to, I think it was February. Forward, my mother was in the hospital. And my mother had always had heart problems. And she had had 2 open heart surgeries. And then she had another heart attack, and she was in the hospital, and she was on life support. Mm-hmm. She had been on life support, I think, for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And my older brother, and I were on the way up to Olympia. And it was the day that we had to decide what we were going to do because my mother was she really needed open heart surgery again for her veins that were clogged. And because she was a diabetic. How ironic is that? Kind of runs in both families. And we had to decide what we were going to do, along with my father, of course. We were just stressed out to the max. I remember that, going up in the car and stuff and talking, different scenarios and stuff. And I get this call from my husband. And I answered it, and he told me Marie had called him, and she wanted to meet me. And she wanted to talk to me, and that she wanted me to call her that day.
So she had a change of heart at this time. Okay.
And I'm like, I can't do that.
I mean, that's bad timing.
Yeah. I said, I can't do that. And he said, well, she would like to talk to you today. And I said, I can't do that. Because I thought if I talked to her, my mom would die. Mm-hmm. I thought it was an omen. If I called and talked to her, and it was bad timing anyway, because I was going through this stressful moment.
Well, and also, if you had called and talked to her and your mom had died, that wouldn't have been the reason, but you would have felt like it was for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
And I was just like, I'm not going to do it. I said, you need to call her and tell her I can't. Mm-hmm. And when I'm ready, I will call her, but I am not ready. Yeah. And I just knew that if I called her, my mom was going to die. I mean, all these things were going through me. So we go up to my mom, and they take her in for the procedure. And the doctor comes out, and he said, she pulled through like a champ. And she's awake, she's off the vent, and she's ready to see you.
Crazy.
So now keep in mind, my mom was out, and she was on a vent, and just...
She hadn't communicated with you in days.
No. And so we walk into her room in ICU, and there she is sitting in a chair. And I walk in, I just remember I was so shocked to see her. She's sitting in this chair in the corner of the room, and she has a very weak high. And there she was. So, yeah, that was really crazy. So long story short, it was a day or two, and she finally gets moved up to another room, and I'm staying with her to help her get in the room, and she really wanted to take a shower, and she didn't want a nurse to shower, and she wanted me to help her and everything. So we're in the room, and we're getting ready to go do all that, and she goes, I have to talk to you about something. And I'm like, what? And she goes, I have to talk to you about Marie. I'm like, okay. And she goes, Marie really wants to talk to you. So you need to reach out to her again. I want you to reach out to her again. Now,
I have goosebumps, by the way. Okay, go ahead.
I had never said anything in the room about Marie. I had never told my mother anything about Marie. I mean, as in her calling, that call. I mean, I've been very open about with my parents the whole way.
Of course.
And because my dad helped me so many times. And
God bless him.
yeah. And so that was weird. So we sat down and talked about it. And, I told her about the phone call and everything. She's like, I just knew. She goes, I knew you needed to call her. You need to call her. I was like, well, let's just get you home first, shall we?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So she was probably home for a week. She went home not very long after that. My mom was a Timex watch. And so she went home just a few days, maybe 2 days later after that. And so we went home and everything. And so then I finally reached out to Marie. And we set up a date to meet, which was in the Denny's restaurant in Centralia.
Oh, I know it well.
And my dad went with me.
I love that.
So, yeah, my dad went with me. My dad was interesting. My dad always went with me when there was one other time when I had a lead. We decided, I think when I was pregnant with Chelsea, and I forgot to say this, is that we found out Betty Dunes was still in the area. And when I only got that birthing record, we went and found Betty Dunes.
Okay.
And when we did find her, my dad went with me again because he knew her and knew her husband.
Oh, I love your dad.
That Betty Dunes had Alzheimer's, so she couldn't tell us anything about, Marie. So
Ouch. Okay.
that was a little tidbit that I forgot. So anyway, my dad went with me and we went and met Marie. And I remember the first thing I said to Marie was, first I want to tell you the reason why I really wanted to meet you and talk to you was medical. I really wanted medical history. I said, I'm curious too. Marie was very short. I am not.
No, you're not.
I'm 5'10".
Yeah.
Yeah. And her brother was short.
Oh, that's a good sign, actually. That's actually, I don't think I remember you telling me that. So
That she was short?
You probably got your height from your father then.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's good to know.
Yes. So we just sat there and talked, and I just wanted to reassure her that I was so thankful that, and I would have to say I could tell that we were raised two totally different ways.
Yeah.
When you look at people, you can tell. And so we were raised two totally different. We came from two totally different
walks of life.
Yeah. And so actually I was really relieved. Yeah. And I just wanted to reassure her that I had a great childhood. I had my dad here with me and that I was very happy and I was thankful for her to be able to give me up and realize that she did not need to feed another mouth.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So that was it. Met her. I did have her over to my house for dinner once and with her brother again because she didn't drive. And I don't remember too much about that. I remember I wanted it to end.
Okay. So how many times did you actually see her?
I saw her again. My kids had wonderful grandparents. My mother raised my kids that whole time that we were there. So that's all they knew was their Grammy and their Papa.
Right.
And then they knew Nels's parents, Grandma and Grandpa Haddon, because they would come and they would only have fun when they were with them. They would take him fishing. They would take him to the park. They took him camping all the time. Both parents did. So they were spoiled rotten. So the fact that, oh my gosh, we got another grandma, this is pay dirt.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So they really wanted to spend time with her and get to know her. And Marie wanted me to come over to her house. So at this time, we found out that Nels was getting transferred and that we were moving with the company and stuff. And she was like, well, I just found you. This was interesting. I remember this. She goes, well, I just found you.
Actually, no, I found you.
Yeah. And so I decided to go over to her house, and I went to that address, and it was in a very, not the greatest neighborhood in the world.
Okay.
And so she lived in a rental and everything. And we walked in the house. The house was very clean. It was very well kept, but it was very worn. Very, very worn. And she had one chair in there, and she had a TV, and then she had one sofa. And the sofa was one of those reclining sofas. Mm-hmm. And they had the indentation where she always sat. Wow. And the house was very smoke-filled. Very, very, very smoke-filled. And so looking next to where she sat, there was an ashtray that was...
Had never been emptied.
I don't think so, no. Never emptied. And then right next to the couch was 2 half-gallons of vodka.
Sure. Okay.
And then her son, Billy, was there. And I'm sure Billy's going to listen to this.
So Billy's your half-brother?
Yeah, Billy's my half-brother, which we'll get into. Mm-hmm. So Billy was there. And so Billy, I'm just giving...
She raised him. She kept him.
Yeah, she kept him. And he's older than me. Billy, you're older than me.
FYI, Billy.
And at that time, Billy was a drug addict. And he was definitely high, tweaking, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I remember him pacing, and we were out in the backyard, and he's like, there's another boy. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
He goes, there's another boy. She had another boy. He's out there somewhere. There's just another boy. And he's saying this, and he's pacing and everything. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. And I go back inside. He doesn't come back inside. And I actually forgot all about that till about a year ago.
Okay.
And I come in, and I'm looking at Marie, and she had lit up a cigarette and was smoking with the kids in the house. And I just knew I could never come back and see her at her house again.
Right. And you certainly couldn't have your kids in that.
I couldn't. And I told Billy this too now,
Good.
Which we'll get to that part of the story. So he knows too, because I've been very honest with him about that whole thing. And I just knew I could never go back, and that there was not going to be a relationship there.
Right.
And I left that house sad that my kids weren't going to get to know Marie.
Their grandparents.
Yeah, they weren't going to get to marry. They were hoping they were going to have a grandma, and they weren't going to get that.
Right.
And so that was it.
So that was the last time you saw her? She did call you a few times, I believe?
She did. She would, and I would out of a comment. Okay, so I opened up this can of worms. Mm-hmm. I started all that. Mm-hmm. So I'm responsible, and I'm okay with that. And I knew, respectively, I needed to stay in contact with her.
Right.
She also had a daughter. Mm-hmm. And I was very curious about the daughter,
Sure.
And I found out that she worked out at Lucky Eagle Casino. And I knew her name, and I went looking for her. And I knew she was a dealer. Found her, kept walking back and forth, looking at her and stuff. And I just hung out in the casino till she was taking a break.
Yes.
And I waited for her to take a break, and we followed her. Yeah. True story. So I followed her, and she went outside to have a cigarette break, and she went out there, and I knew she knew about me.
Right.
Because Marie said she had told her, or I had hoped she told her. Mm-hmm. And I just walked up to her, and I said, Kenda. And she said, yes. And I said, I am Betsy. I am the person that Marie gave up.
And what did she say?
I don't really remember.
Okay.
What I do remember, it was really rude of me to do that at her work.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it was a surprise.
So you felt bad about it?
Now.
You do now? Yeah. Okay.
Not at the time, but
the
now.
Things we learn.
Yeah. And I don't remember the conversation or anything. Again, it wasn't another aha moment. She was short. I mean, shorter than me. Sorry.
Yes. Thanks. She's saying that because I'm short.
Well, no, I was saying that to Kenda, to say the only thing I got out of it was you were short.
Okay. So. Did she mention that you resembled her mother at all?
No. No, I remember her taken back, surprised that I came up to her and stuff. It was very rude what I did. It really was.
A little
that
out of
is
sorts,
not.
I guess.
That is not. I'm this curious person.
Yeah.
It's a need to know basis with me, and I need to know. Mm-hmm. And so I always find this stuff out. I mean, talk to anybody here in town in Walla Walla. I know everything because I have to know.
Oh, Betsy, you are preaching to the choir. My friend. So, okay, so because I said that because you sent me a few pictures of Marie, and I completely see you in her.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Did you at the time?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, because I only knew Marie, older and well-worn Marie, who was an alcoholic.
Okay, then you saw younger
And that
pictures.
takes a toll on a body. And then one day her brother called and said that she had fallen and had broken her hip and just wanted to let me know she was in the hospital. I was like, okay, thank you. I did call her while she was in the hospital, I recall. And then he called me back and said that they had found a spot on her liver. And he just wanted to let me know. And I said, well, she never said anything about that. And he goes, well, I don't think she's going to tell you. And I don't know what the timeline was. I honestly don't know. But Kenda called me and she said, Mama's gone. And I'm like, where'd she go? And she know that she had died. Connie, I think Connie was the neighbor. And I believe her name was
Mama.
Connie. Yeah.
Interesting.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And she said, Connie, I couldn't get a hold of her. So I called Connie, who was her neighbor. Right. And she went over there and she had died sitting in her chair.
Parker lounger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And she didn't do an autopsy on her. I think we all knew, but never said.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Alcoholism. It's going to get the person. But I also tend to wonder if it was that spot.
It very well could have been.
Right.
It could have been any number of combinations too.
Exactly.
Right.
So
okay, so that was Marie.
That was Marie.
That was your adventure with Marie.
So put that all to bed.
Put it all to bed.
And we're going to jump forward to 2017.
Thank you for listening to Cutoff Genes, the new podcast starring Julie Dixon Jackson.
All right, we're back, and that is the end of the first episode, the first part of Betsy's interview, which is riveting, I believe. And we'll hear the rest of that in a couple days, along with some news for her about some discoveries I've made in the past year that I've worked on her paternal line. That's right, I said year. It's a tough one. Anyway, so hey, thanks for listening, guys. Come back on Wednesday or whenever I drop that. It'll be soon. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email me at julesjackson@cutoffgenes.com. You can catch us on Twitter at cutoffgenespod or me on Twitter at julesjackson. And join the Facebook group, Cutoff Genes Podcast, because there's lots of extra stuff there. Okay. Hey, thanks for listening, guys. Keep listening. Please share. And I appreciate your support. I'll talk to you guys soon.